सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै.
Sorry about that. I think I clicked the button earlier. So welcome back, and hopefully everybody is healthy and staying strong. So today is our second session of Atmabodha. So before we get started, as always, let's pray our respect and gratitude towards everybody who is working for us, the healthcare professionals and everybody. So really, really mean it. Okay, so with that, we can get into the text. So in the first session, what we did was we tried to understand where exactly the Atmabodha fits within the domain of the Vedic literature or within the layers of Vedic literature. We have seen a brief introduction of the system of scriptures in the Vedic literature. So 7 layers we have seen, and Atmabodha is a Prakarana Grantha which comes at the 7th layer of that scriptural domain. So today we will do a quick introduction on Atmabodha, and then we will jump into the Atmabodha text itself, and we will cover the first 3 verses, and we will reserve some 10 minutes for question answers. And I got a very interesting question offline. I'll try to answer that at the end. This question was mainly regarding the scriptures we talked about last week. So with that, let's get into Atmabodha. So first point is that Atmabodha is a Prakarana scripture. Do you remember what is a Prakarana scripture? Anybody?
It's collections from various scriptures together.
Yes. The purpose is?
The purpose is to self-unfoldment.
The introduction, like more than self, of course, Upanishad is also self-unfoldment. But the purpose of a Prakarana book is twofold. One is the first category of Prakarana books or the main Prakarana books. The goal is to introduce the Vedic scriptures so that we can go and study the other layers of the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads or Sutras, because it introduces the basic concepts and terminology so that we won't feel completely blank when we go and read an Upanishad. So this is a mandatory study before the study of any major Vedantic book. So we saw the examples like Tattvabodha, Atmabodha, Viveka Chudamani, Aparochanubhuti, etc. And the second category of the Prakarana book is after studying the Upanishad, it will reconcile everything. So the classic example is Panchadashi. So these type of Panchadashi or Dakshinamurti Stotram, such books will be studied after studying the Upanishads, whereas the books like Atmabodha or the Tattvabodha are Prakarana books which should be studied prior to the study of the Upanishads. So please keep in mind. So this is the 7th layer of scriptures in our Vedic system. The purpose is to introduce the other scriptures and basic technological term or terminology, basic terminologies. So it's a Prakarana book, and the book itself reveals the content or the subject matter of the book. Atma means myself. Bodha means knowledge. So it is giving the knowledge about myself. Who am I? That is the main focus of this book, Atmabodha. Whereas Tattvabodha, there is another book the key focus is tat tat. So tat means that. That means the absolute reality, and understanding of the absolute reality. Basically, both are same. So that we will come and see later. So Tattvabodha, the focus is myself. Whereas, sorry, the Tattvabodha, the focus is the higher truth. Atmabodha, the focus is myself. And the beauty of this text is, it introduces almost all the key Vedantic topics in simple Sanskrit. Anybody interested in learning chanting? This is very easy to learn chant. It's not a difficult thing to chant. So it can be learned easily to chant. It's in simple Sanskrit, and it describes the different stages of the self-identity. Initially, when you identify with the body, what exactly it is. When you identify with the Sukshma Sharira, what exactly is your feeling, everything. And it also is going to talk about when you identify with your own true nature. And the beauty of this text is that every verse, after the introductory verse, every verse is giving one example. And one example from the real day-to-day life. So we can easily relate to that. So that is the style of this scripture. And there are 68 couplets in the entire textbook. Like there are 68 verses. And there is no grouping or classification or title. It's just 68 verses are given for the Atmabodha. And the authorship of this text is generally attributed to Shankara. But some people always question that, right? So that's exactly what one question I had. Because the other day I was just explaining all the scriptural domain. Like I said, Vyasa classified the Vedas. I said Vyasa wrote the Brahma Sutra. And then I said Vyasa wrote the 18 Puranas and yet 18 Upapuranas. And then I said Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. So somebody asked me, is it humanly possible? So I'll explain that with a legitimate, logical answer. It could be an aha moment for a lot of you, but I will explain at the end. So then the authorship is attributed to Shankara, and definitely it follows the style of the Shankara. The question is, it could be Shankara, Adi Shankaracharya, or it could be somebody later in his lineage, but the tradition believes that it is Adi Shankaracharya. So the Vedanta tradition believes that this textbook is composed by Adi Shankaracharya for his disciple Padmapada. Padmapada was one of his chief major disciples. 4 disciples, one was Padmapada. So Shankara composed this work for Padmapada. So that's the belief, and it is better to believe that. And it doesn't matter who composed it. The content is more important. And generally believed that it is Shankara. So with that, I just wanted to quote one beautiful quote Swami Chinmayananda did in his book, Atmabodha. So the 2 popular commentaries on Atmabodha is, one is in 1947, a commentary was written by Swami Nikhilananda. Swami Nikhilananda. He was in US. He was a Ramakrishna mission monk. His commentary is there. I already put that commentary in our OneDrive in the library. You can all download. And the second commentary, the most popular one of the books, modern commentary, is by Swami Chinmayananda. Swami Chinmayananda's commentary is also good. It's available in Kindle. It is available with the Chinmaya Mission. So that's a good source. And the third book we can refer for Atmabodha is the Chinmaya International Foundation in Kerala. They have a study notes created by the students. So that's also a good source. I'll be using that. And then Swami Paramarthananda had done some talks on Atmabodha. And in the YouTube channel of Arshabodha, Swami Tadatmananda put a video with the verses and the chanting and the brief meaning. That is extremely useful. And the last one I would say is Swami Dayananda Saraswati also had done a class the keys, but I would be referring all that and talking to you. And the books are already there in the OneDrive, and if you want, you can download and read. It is better to read that offline and come back with any questions you may have. See, it means I may not follow exactly like the commentary. I would follow based on the best understanding we get from multiple sources and our own contemplation. And that freedom we have to take. But we will be always keeping our foot on the traditional teaching. So Swami Chinmayananda said, right, this is the sentence he wrote. He said, Shankaracharya, in the days of his perfect maturity, took up his pen to write the introductory books. What was the purpose? Introducing the theme of Vedanta to the infants in the spiritual world. Look at the language he has used. Brilliantly explained. So, introducing the theme of Vedanta for the infants in the spiritual world. Atmabodha is one of them. And any ideas discussed in the Atmabodha is not Shankaracharya's idea. It is all lifted from Upanishad. But he presented with brilliant similes, and he presented it for the infants in the spiritual world. So people like us. So that's really brilliantly put. That's why I quoted that. So with that, we can move to the verse. First verse. The first verse is going to talk about the purpose of this book. So we can chant. Anybody knows this chanting? Otherwise, I will try. Okay, I will try. I told Anu to learn chanting. So hopefully she will pick up very soon so that you don't have to listen to me chanting. So today I'll chant. We will go one line per line. So you can also chant. So that way it will create a vibration. So the first verse. So the first verse by tradition, the first verse of any book of Prakarana Grantha, by tradition, it has to express its intent properly. I will explain what exactly, how it is done. So let's see. So the verse 1. Tapo pichina papanam.
Tapo bhikshina papanam.
Shantanam
vitaraginam.
Shantanam vitaraginam. Mumukshunam apechuyam.
Mumukshunam
Atmabodho vidhiyate.
Atmabodho vidhiyate.
Simple Sanskrit. This anybody can learn to chant. So he tells Atmabodho vidhiyate. The simple trick in interpreting Sanskrit is you go back from left to right. Any word. And this is a poetry. So poetry, you may have to shuffle the word a little bit. So the first point is Atmabodho vidhiyate. I am composing Atmabodha. So the intent is made very clear, right? I'm doing some work. Then he is explaining why. Mumukshunam apekshoyam. For whom? The people who are mumukshus. Mumukshus means people who wanted to get out of their sufferings, who seek freedom from suffering, who seek moksha, who seeks the highest purpose of life, who seeks the highest possibilities of their life. So I am composing this work called Atmabodha. For what? For helping mumukshus, for those who seek a higher purpose of life. So those who seek to get out of the sufferings of life, or those who seek enlightenment. So the intent is made very clear, right? Atmabodho means vidhiyate. I am composing Atmabodha, or Atmabodha is being composed for mumukshunam apekshoyam, the one who seek moksha. And then what means couple of qualifications are given. He says, Tapopi china papanam shantanam vitaraginam. So three things he tells. China papanam shantanam vitaraginam. China papanam. Papa means impurity. China papa means what? The one who eliminated all the impurities of the mind. People who are fit for enlightenment. The people who are fit for freedom from suffering. They should have a couple of pre-qualifications. And one such qualification is a pure mind. So a mind that is fleshed out all the papas, all the impurities. Papa loosely translated as impurities. It's not original sin. So papas here means it is impurities. The one who eliminated all the impurities of the mind. Then what? Shantana, one whose mind is quiet, stable. So pure mind, qualification number 1. Second mind is calm mind, Shanta. And the third one is Vita Raginam. Vita means free. Raginam means from dependency, emotional dependency. A mind which is quiet, a mind which is free from emotional dependency, or a mind which is calm and controlled. That mind. So two such people. Sorry. So the first thing is, means the text Atmabodha is composed for anybody who seeks liberation, anybody who seeks the highest purpose of life, anybody who seeks freedom from suffering. And what is the qualities of that student? One is China Papana. All their mental impurities are flushed out. Second thing is Shanta. Their mind is calm. And Vitaraganam, free of any emotional dependencies or turbulence. Those who attended our Vedanta class, do you hear me saying every class two things, Chitta Shuddhi and Chitta Sthiti? This is exactly what it is. And how can you gain that? He tells Tapophi, by practicing tapa. Tapa means any dedicated activity. Any dedicated activity for a higher purpose is known as tapas. It's not like standing on one leg or hanging from a tree. That's symbolic representation of tapas. Tapas means any spiritual practice you undertake can be called as tapas. Karma yoga is a tapas. Upasana yoga is a tapas. So by the practice of karma yoga and upasana yoga, those who made their mind pure, those who made their mind calm, and those who made their mind controlled, such people, for such people who has desire, who has deep interest in getting into the highest purpose of life, getting into the highest possibilities of life, I am composing this book called Atmabodha. Good start, right? The whole theme of the book is introduced in one verse. So, Tapopi China Papanam, Shantanam Vitaraginam, Mumukshunam Apekshoyam, Atmabodho Vidhiyate. I'm composing Atmabodha, or Atmabodha has been composed for the people who seek the highest purpose of life, who with their practice, with their spiritual practice, have cleaned their mind and controlled their mind. For such people, this work is done, composed, made. So let's see a little bit more detail. So there are certain traditions when you compose something in the ancient words. It is always believed that these type of textbooks starts with some auspicious. Auspicious means it is not any jataka or anything like that. Certain words. So if you look at all the what you call the sutras, you can see it started with atha. Lot of mantras starts with om. So here the book started with tapas, the word. The word tapas is considered as an auspicious word to start in the context of this work. So that's very interesting and noted. So this tapas, as I said, it is a practice undertaken for achieving a higher or a noble goal. So any goal which is aligned with dharma, if you pursue, if you put consistent effort, what happens? That is called tapas. The tapas, the literal meaning is from the word tapa, means heat. So the heat will be there. You'll be working hard for that, and that is what is indicated. And symbolically in Puranas, you would see these rishis will be doing penance by putting fire all over the places, etc., etc. That means it is a symbolic representation of the effort. They are ready to suffer a little bit. Means they are ready to sacrifice some of their conveniences, some of their luxuries for that noble goal. So once you undertaken the tapas, what happens? One gets the necessary purity and stability of the mind. So the first thing anybody needs is the purity and the stability of the mind. So this tapas is the door to that auspiciousness, and this tapas is a path which leads you to these two practices. The practice of karma yoga, upasana yoga, can be considered as tapas. It cleans all the dirt in our mind and makes us ready to receive whatever knowledge that is being taught. So I think I made it multiple times clear in the Bhagavad Gita class and the Vedanta class. Without this pre-qualification, like a pure mind and a stable mind, this knowledge about the self will be para aksha anubhuti. It will be not a direct experience. So if you want to experience what we are being taught here, what being taught by Shankaracharya, we need to consciously practice karma yoga and upasana yoga. So I gave you the other day, right? What is karma yoga? Panchamaha yajna. Start with that. Every day, little bit. If you don't have any other time, sit and pray. 5 minutes, pray to God for the well-being of the society, etc. So, and upasana yoga means I talked about 4 types of upasana. So these are regular practices we need to have. Without that, this will not make much benefit. Okay. So this benefit of tapas, China Papana, the first one, purified from the mental impurities. Vita Raginam, freedom from emotional dependency. So that way, the turbulence of the mind will be controlled. Shantanam, stability of the mind. And Mumukshutvam, you will feel a desire to go higher. So this is the benefit of tapas. So when you practice tapas, you get these qualification, and these qualification, the students with these qualification, if they study this book, I'm writing this book for them. That is what Shankaracharya says. So this is a recap from our Vedanta class. If you remember the Vedanta class, we discussed something called Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. If you remember, Viveka means the ability to discernment, like discernment, that is the word, or discrimination. So what is right, what is wrong. So that will give you the China Papana. And Vairagya means dispassion. Dispassion means what? Lack of emotional dependency. That's what it is simply. It's not that you don't like anything. No, absolutely not. I'm not obsessed with anything. That's it. And then Shama Adi Shatka Sampatti. That is the third discipline, mental disciplines. And that is what makes us Shantana. And Mumukshutvam, desire for liberation. This is only to connect you with what we covered in the Vedanta class. Other than that, nothing. So this is just a mapping. And finally, any such textbook, Atmabodha or Tattvabodha, when it starts, it is a tradition that the first verse introduce something called Anubandha Chatushtaya. Anubandha Chatushtaya means 4 prospectus. So let me just quickly explain what are they. The first one is called Adhikari. So any book will tell who is Adhikari, eligible student to practice this textbook. Can you tell me who is the Adhikari here? The first verse clearly explained. One who has China Papana, right? Yes. Shantana, Vitaraginam. These are the 3 qualifications. So those are the Adhikaris of this book. So don't tell me that, don't worry, I don't have it. That's okay. You just practice Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga. So that's it. So the Adhikari is defined. And second thing is Vishaya. This is a traditional style. The first words should give me these 4 details very clearly. So first one is Adhikari. So who is Adhikari? We talked about that. And second one we saw is Vishaya. What is the subject matter of this book? The subject matter of the book is Atmabodho Vidhyate. The knowledge about self. That is what it is. So the Vishaya is given. And the third point is Prayojana. What is the benefit of studying this book? Shankaracharya himself tells, even a fool will not take undertake an activity without expecting a result. So you need to expect a result. Karma Yoga doesn't mean that you should not expect a result. That is not what Karma Yoga tells. We'll see that later. So what is the result? Mumukshutvam, right? It's a liberation. It's a path to liberation. That is the benefit. And sambandha. Sambandha means what exactly is going to help me to get the prayojana. So he said, I'm composing this book, which is going to act as a sambandha for you to get that liberation. So this is a standard style of our scriptures. Look at the way they do. It's brilliant. By just looking at the first verse, you will get the whole purpose of this book. 4 things. Adhikari, right? The Adhikari is given. Vishaya, the subject matter of the book is given. Third one is Prayojana. And fourth is called Sambandha. Adhikari, Vishaya, Prayojana, Sambandha. Adhikari means qualified student. Vishaya means the subject matter of the book. Prayojana means the benefit of the book. And the Sambandha means how I can realize that benefit. This is very important. Have you seen the modern, something called blueprints? Before you take any big work in big companies, they call it as blueprints. And you would see that benefit realization is a key thing. What exactly is the benefit you are seeking out of it? And there will be some plan saying that this is how you realize the benefit. So this is very important. It follows the same style. Program charters in the modern world defines these things. But this is 1200 years back, Shankaracharya is writing. And that's the first verse. Any question?
So Rajaji, like in the previous slide talks about Anubandha
Sadhana Chatushtaya Sambandha.
Right. So that's like all the process of becoming eligible.
Yes. So Sadhana Chatushtaya Sambandha means you can just listen to the introduction to Vedanta. There is we did one session on this. What means, see, if we are using a means of knowledge, there has to be certain conditions for that means of knowledge to work. For example, if you use your eyes to see an object outside, if there is no light, is that going to work?
No.
Your eyes will be perfectly working, but you won't see anything. So sufficient light is one prerequisite. So for using Vedanta as a means of knowledge to know myself, there is some precondition. And that preconditions are known as Sadhana Chatushtaya Sambandha. There are 4-fold qualification, they say. One is called Vivekam. You need to know what is real and what is unreal. Second thing is called Vairagyam. You should not have emotional dependency. Your mind should be completely under control. That doesn't mean that you won't cry, but it is in your control. See, you are driving your car. Nobody is saying that don't speed the car, but you should have the control. But if you don't have the control over the wheel, and if the car is going in an uncontrolled pace, is that good for you?
No.
Isn't that what is happening in our mind?
Mm-hmm.
I say something to my spouse, and after 1 hour, I think, what? I should not have done that.
Yeah.
Why? It was I never had the control over the wheels.
Mm.
So that is very important. And then third, 6-4 discipline. Yeah, means just to enumerate: Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhana. So this is going to come later in this Atmabodha. So I'm not going to elaborate a lot right now. And the last one is Mumukshutvam. You should see a higher purpose in life. The purpose is not just to go and drink and sleep and eat, and then that's not the goal. You should feel that, say, for example, if I get 10 more years of life, why should I get that 10 more years? Should I get that 10 more years to suffer, to cry, to be in stressful, or should I get some beautiful days which are good for everybody, for myself and everybody? So you should see a higher purpose in life. So that's the Mumukshutvam. And then actually, just to clarify that, how to gain these qualifications, Vedanta tells practice Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga. So as a beginner, because last week somebody was asking me the question and I explained, what exactly is the beginning point? Practice Karma Yoga and practice Upasana Yoga. Don't worry about anything, because that is going to give you the necessary qualification. Okay, so this is the first verse. So let's
One
go to the
question.
next
One
verse. This
question.
is beautiful verse.
Rajesh,
Brilliant example. The second verse. So let's chant. Let's chant.
Rajesh, I think there is a question from Bhuvanaji.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Sorry, Punaji.
no problem. You mentioned about the 4 devotees, right? So the Jignasu, does he fall in this in this category?
Yes, Mumukshu. The Jignasu is Mumukshu.
Okay. And you also mentioned about Shankaracharya's disciple Bhagavad Pada, right?
Padmapada. Padmapada.
Padmapada. And his guru is Govindapada.
Shankaracharya's guru is Govindapada. His disciples are Padmapada, Hastamalaka, Sureshwaracharya, and
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know how Padmapada got, means those who are interested in stories, these stories are all additions and deletions. We have no guarantee about the authority or the authorship of this story. I'm just going to narrate. Padmapada was a very dedicated student of Shankara. So his name was Sanandana, was his name. So he was very committed, very loyal to his teacher. And one day, Padmapada was standing on one side of the river. Shankara was staying on the other side. Shankara called him, Sanandana, come. He didn't think anything. He just walked over the river, and the stories, the legend tells that there were lotus wherever he put his step. And since the lotus came when he stepped over it, he came to known as Padma Pada. Pada means where the foot, and Padma is lotus.
So
These are all additions, deletions, infiltration, penetrations. So just take it. If you want to believe it, believe it. If you don't believe it, don't believe it. That doesn't diminish the glory of Shankara. If you believe it, it's not going to elevate the glory of Shankara. That much I can tell.
So just like Jesus Christ, Padmapada also walked on water.
Yeah, exactly. So all means you can see the same stories with every master, whether it is a Christ or Buddha, whether it is a Krishna or Rama. People always add stuffs.
so
It's
so
very
Rajesh,
interesting, right? If you play the game of telephone, you don't have to go to a generation. Like we have some 20 people here. Like if I tell the first person, if you pass it to the 10th person with his own sentence, I'm guarantee. It's a game we play, right, in the corporate team buildings. Game of telephone. So that's very important. So these things will get added, but I wanted to let you know that this is how he got the name.
So Rajesh, in the first sloka you said the Sanskrit is simple. So you said while translating it, we have to go from some direction you mentioned.
No, I think, see, I was telling a Sanskrit word is a compound word usually, right?
Yes.
So a compound word, understanding the compound word, the easy way is read from right to left.
Okay.
So that's a simple solution to understand Sanskrit. Don't worry about that. And I didn't say that the first 2 verses is simple. I said that all the verses are simple in Sanskrit. Yeah. So let's go to the second verse. The theme of the first 2 verses, the purpose of this book, and who is an eligible student, right? So the second verse is going to talk about knowledge, the importance of knowledge. So he tells, let's chant, he tells, Bodhonya sadhane pyohi
Bodhonya sadhane
sakshat mokshaika sadhanam pakasya vajnanam Vinamocho na siddhyati. So how do you, means if your goal is the highest goal of life, which is freedom from all suffering, is to know yourself. If that is the goal, What is the means to get that? So Shankaracharya tells, Bodhonya sadhane pyohi, as opposed to every other spiritual practice, sakshat mokshaika sadhanam. So compared to all the spiritual practices, when you look at the spiritual practices, oh my God, infinite number. You have bhakti yoga, you have hatha yoga, you have pranayama, you have meditation, you have puja, you have charity, you have mantra japa, hundreds of things. Considering if you consider all these practices, Shankara make it very clear. This is the beauty of Shankara. He comes to the subject matter straightforward. He tells, Bodho anya sadhanapya pyohi. Other than knowledge, any other practices cannot give you, means it's not a direct means for self-knowledge or enlightenment. Other than bodha, meaning the self-knowledge, any other practices is not a direct means of self-enlightenment. Then he gives a brilliant example. Pakasya vagni vajnanam vina moksho na vidyate. So you see the picture of a cooking, right? So imagine that there is a vessel. In that vessel, there is water. In that water, there is rice. And you're trying to cook. What exactly cook the rice? Is it the vessel?
Fire.
Fire. Exactly. Fire is the direct cause of cooking, means cause or means to cook. But what is the problem? If I have fire and rice, can you cook? No. So you need some indirect means or supporting tools, but that doesn't mean that if you have water, water is not cooking the rice. Without fire, water cannot do anything. The vessel is absolutely mandatory. Everything, whatever that is required is a sufficient condition, but the mandatory thing is fire. Fire cooks the rice. Everything else support fire. So brilliant example. So Shankaracharya tells, if you want to know yourself, you need to use what? Knowledge. So what is the place of other sadhanas? He is not saying that the other sadhanas are important. The role of other sadhanas are like water, like the vessel, like the firewood, all that is required. But what exactly is cooking the rice? Vagni. Like that, what exactly is giving us the liberation? Knowledge. This example was a big, clear example for me, because a lot of people get confused. What exactly you hear, like karma yoga will give you liberation. Some people say bhakti will give you liberation. Some people will say hatha yoga will give you liberation. Not at all. So to illustrate this, let's go to the stock example of Vedanta. The stock example of Vedanta is the 10th man story. Right? Two examples I'll give you. One is the 10th man story. You all know the 10th man story, right?
No.
Anybody here who is not aware of 10th man? Oh, you don't know?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay. 10th man story is 10 disciple of a teacher went for a pilgrimage. Not modern day, ancient times. So imagine that they are living in a jungle and they are going in a remote village for the festival. In between, there was a river, and they found that this river it was full and it has a current. So what they did was everybody swam. On the other side, counting 1, 2, 3, 4. How many people he counted? 9. Why?
He was himself the 10th
He
man.
didn't count himself. So what was the natural conclusion?
That they lost a man.
One fellow was drowned. So then the second person said, no, I'm going to count. He also counted. How many? 9. So the conclusion was we lost somebody. They started searching. They searched all the woods, all the trees, they searched the water. Somebody went into the water. They started crying, screaming. A big scene has happened. Suddenly a passerby came there. So he said, what is the matter? They started crying and explaining him. So first, what did he do? He asked them to sit quiet. Asked them to take a few deep breaths. When they were about to listen, he said, I'm going to count. He counted 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 9. He counted. And then to the leader, he said, Dashamaha Asti. In simple, plain English, idiot, you are the 10th man. At that time, what did he got? Self-realization. A kind of self-realization. What? The person I was looking was myself. So this is the traditional 10th man story. So till he find that 10th man, what was his state of mind?
Confused.
Extremely miserable.
Distressed.
Now let's say that he has undertaking spiritual practices. They were extremely miserable. So everybody said, okay, let's do some bhajans. They sat there and started singing bhajans. Is the 10th man is going to come? No way, right? Let's do Hatha Yoga. No. Let's do pranayama. No. Let's pray to God. Nothing will happen. Only one thing can remove their fear or the suffering. What is that?
Self.
Knowledge. So if the problem is ignorance, no other solution other than knowledge. But remember, what exactly is the passerby did? When these people were extremely crazy mood, if he tells that you are the 10th man, is he going to listen?
No.
Even if he tells he is the 10th man, it won't register with him. So what did he do first? He did some pranayama, made them a little bit calm so that the knowledge, they are in a state to receive the knowledge. So exactly like that. The self-knowledge alone can make you free or give you the liberation. So here afterwards, if you hear that Bhakti Yoga is going to give you liberation, not directly at all. The role of Bhakti Yoga is like a firewood. The role of Raja Yoga is like the water. That's it. But they are absolutely must have. Without them, the knowledge may not work. But what exactly is giving moksha? What exactly is giving the highest purpose of life is only knowledge. See, look at the clarity of Shankara, meaning it's crystal clear. And this example is such a brilliant example.
So Rajaji, question.
Yeah.
Isn't self-knowledge the same as enlightenment?
Absolutely. The enlightenment is a state and self-knowledge is the means.
Okay.
Okay, so let's continue. So the subject matter begins with this verse. What exactly is the subject matter? Knowledge of the self. So now the question is, naturally they say a preference is given to Jnana Yoga because he said other than knowledge, self-knowledge, no other practice is a direct means to enlightenment. And the reason is self-knowledge is the direct means of enlightenment because the other sadhanas or the practices is going to give me the eligibility to receive self-knowledge. The Hatha Yoga, the Pranayama, the Karma Yoga, or any Upasana Yoga, it is to give me a stable mind and a pure mind. That's it. That's the goal of these yogas. After that, you need Jnana Yoga, the knowledge. Only knowledge can solve the issue. Imagine the issue of the dream. Let's use the same example. You are in your dream. I'll quote this example because this example was the funniest example somebody told me very recently. So somebody is dreaming that she's walking through New York City and somebody came and spit her and said that you also got corona. So that is the story. So when somebody spits at her in the dream, what would be her case? State. Extremely miserable, right? So let's say that in the dream she does pranayama. Is that going to help her? Yes, in the dream world, it will calm her up. That's it. What is the only means for her to get out of that? Convert that to a lucid dream. Know that it is a dream. That is knowledge. Again, knowledge. If this is the underlying point Shankaracharya is trying to say. If the problem is ignorance, the only solution for that problem is knowledge. Okay, so this is the second verse. So it's 9:20. So I may stop here. I was planning to cover one more verse, but it's fine. So let's quickly recap. So we saw two verses, means we saw a quick introduction of Atma Bodha. The Atma Bodha is a Prakarana Grantha. And what is a Prakarana Grantha? A book written for introducing Vedanta to spiritual infants. I'm borrowing from words from Swami Chinmayananda. He's known for this powerful language. So Swami Chinmayananda said, this has 68 words. The focus is the self-knowledge, is the focus of Atma Bodha. And means authorship is said to be Shankara, but there are some disputes, but it doesn't matter. Message is more important than the messenger always. So let's keep that attitude. And then we said the first verse introduces the purpose of this book, meaning four things introduces. One is who is the Athikaris, eligible people of this book. We saw three qualification. China Pana, the mind free from all the impurities or all the sins. Then Shantana. Shantana means one who is quiet, whose mind is quiet. And then we saw one more. Vitaraganam. The mind is not emotionally dependent or emotionally intelligent people. We can say that. And what is the benefit? It will lead you to the moksha. And what is the sambandha? This book is composed for that. What a brilliant way to introduce it. And I also said, what is the means for gain this qualification? Tapas. So tapas is the qualification. And I also said, tapas is an auspicious word in our culture. Another brilliant book that starts with tapas. Anybody know? Valmiki Ramayana. Valmiki Ramayana, the first word is tapa. Okay. The next verse we saw, there are so many spiritual practices, but there is only one spiritual practice that can give you directly moksha. That is knowledge. If the problem is ignorance, the solution is knowledge. That doesn't mean that the other sadhanas are not very important. So this is the two verses we saw. It's such a great book. We can continue to discuss this in the next week, but let me just pick up a couple of questions. Okay, so the first question I got from the last week class. So I'm going to take that first, and then we will open it up for this week's question. So one question was, I said there are 18 Puranas, 18 Upapuranas, and I said like 18 Puranas size is around 400,000 verses. I said the Mahabharata size is 100,000 verses, and there is a Brahma Vidya, and then somebody who compiled Veda. And I made one comment, right? I said like I started reading Mahabharata, and I found that if I read 2,000 verses per year, it will take 50 years for me to read Mahabharata. So that triggered a question from one person. She was asking me, like, if you find it difficult to read, how can we believe that one person composed all these 400,000 plus 100,000, 500,000, and then actually these Brahma Sutras and everything? Reasonable doubt, right? Yeah, we have to ask such questions. First of all, two answers. The first answer is Vyasa didn't compose all these verses. So let's say Mahabharata. Do you know how many verses Vyasa composed?
100,000.
8,000. Vyasa composed 8,000. So this is how it started. So Mahabharata, if you take the Mahabharata book, it has 3 layers of story. The first layer is Vyasa, when he did a lot of work. The first work is he compiled the Vedas. And then he did what? He taught each Veda to one of his disciples and asked them to go and practice it. Then he taught the Mahabharata to one disciple. And then he taught all these Puranas. He composed only 4,000 verses. That is what it became 4 lakh. 4,000 verses were composed and given to Lomapada. So there is a Rishi, his disciple. And the Mahabharata was composed and given to a Rishi called Vaishampayana. And the name of what Vyasa composed is called Jayam, not Mahabharata. So this Jayam had only 8,000 verses. It was given to Vaishampayana. And then Vaishampayana told this story to a king called Janamejaya. This Janamejaya was the son of Parikshit, who was Arjuna's grandson, Abhimanyu's son. So this Janamejaya was doing a big ritual. At that time, Vyasa and all his disciples comes in, and Janamejaya goes and asks him, can you narrate the Mahabharata story to Vyasa? So Vyasa said, my disciple Vaishampayana is going to tell you. So in front of Vyasa, Vaishampayana narrates it. And when he narrated it, initially he narrated it in like 12 verses. Janamejaya said, no, I need details. So then what happened was, this Vaishampayana told the story of Mahabharata. 8,000 verses composed by Vyasa, which is known as Jayam, was described by this Vaishampayana to Janamejaya. It became 24,000 verses. And that is what is known as Bharatam. So Jayam became 1,000 verses became 24,000 verses. And then what happened? There was a sage, there was professional narrators at that point of time. That was the style. So Vyasa and that system had professional narrators of these scriptures. And one Purana even gives the definition, qualification of a person to become a narrator, good narrator. Like he has to have clear understanding of the scripture. His voice should not be anunasika. He has to have the ability to speak fluently, engage the audience. A brilliant speaker should be he. And such people were known as Suta. Suta is not the, you don't think that it is the horse rider charioteer. No, this context, Suta means a person is a professional narrator of the Puranas and Idihasas. So this Suta is a title, and his name was Ugrashravas. He went to a forest called Naimisharanya. Naimisharanya is a forest in Uttar Pradesh. He went and attended a yajna conducted by a sage called Shamika. See, I'm not confusing, I'm just answering the question, just giving all the details. These layers itself can be confusing. So these rishis asked the Suta, the professional narrator, can you narrate the Mahabharata? So he narrated what Vaishampayana described in 24,000 verses in 100,000 verses. So that time, to be fair, it's approximately 89,000 verses. So what is started as Jayam expanded into Mahabharata at the time of Vaishampayana, and then at the time of Suta, when he was retooled, that is what is the Mahabharata we have right now, which has 89,000.
So is it a question of the telephone story?
No, but here the backward traceability was there. So the content quality is assured in Mahabharata.
So
that may not be 100% true for all the Puranas.
So it was just expanded and expanded and expanded, right? Okay.
So Rajesh, I read that Mahabharata has got 100,000 verses. That's
it is.
Okay, now where does the incident of Ganesha writing Mahabharata and Vyasa saying and Ganesha writing 15.
8,000 verses. It is the Jayam.
So the Jayam part.
Jayam part. So the 100,000 is the Mahabharata we have right now, which is the narration of Suta. So Ganesha wrote what Vyasa was dictating, that is 8,000 verse, and that is what is known as Jayam. You know the first verse of Mahabharata? Anybody? Narayanam Namastupya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayam Tato Jayamudijayati.
Correct.
Jayam. You can see how that Mahabharata was called at the initial composition.
That's good.
So
So
Mahabharata
when
is
the
like-
Mahabharata, it starts like the first 18 parvas are there in Mahabharata, right?
Mm.
So the first parva called Adi Parva, the first 53 chapter is the conversation between Suta and these people, Shamika.
I see.
So one question, Rajesh, is we in a lot of Puranas it says Sudar Kurgirar, Sudar says.
Yeah, I'm going to tell that. Yeah.
Is
So,
that one person called Sudar?
no, Suta is a title, right? I said professional narrators.
So it can be anybody.
It can be anybody. So
Okay.
Sutas, if Puranas, what happened was Vyasa gave some 4,000 verses.
Hmm.
That 4,000 verses was taught to different storytellers. They, according to the time and place, they added, and it was enhanced up to the regime of Gupta dynasty.
So is it possible that people could have used their own imagination too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To be fair, you can see that. For
So
example,
it's kind of like the Bible compiled together. Then I
correct.
guess.
Bible is like
Stories
that.
added to it, right?
Yeah, added to that.
Or even the Quran. For that matter.
Everything. Quran is 100% is Muhammad's revelation. Nobody can add or change because there is a strict stuff. But Purana means the purpose is different, right? The purpose is different. The purpose is in story form. You have to pass this to generation.
Right.
So the last addition we can see is at the time of Gupta dynasty. For example, there is in one Purana you can see the Konark, the Surya temple is mentioned.
Mm.
Surya temple is developed only recently. So around Gupta's time frame, the Maurya's time frame. Sorry, Maurya's. Maurya's itself is beyond Christ, before Christ. So the Puranas, there is a beautiful verse in one Purana. In one of the classes, I will bring that out. So in one Purana, it is told that like the Purana is like a river. If you think Ganga in the Ganges, right? The Ganga in the Gangotri. The Gomukh, what starts is only a stream. In Gangotri, it's a small river. What happens when it flows? It adds bigger, it becomes bigger, richer and everything. So the Purana was started by Vyasa. But a lot of these suttas added content. And some of them could be controversial. Some of them may not be relevant for today. But there is a fundamental thread is given by Vyasa. So that's why you cannot take the Puranas, everything as it is. It's important to know that. And we need to be very fair, right? There is nothing, this is to not to say that Purana is bad or anything like that. It is fantastic, but it is a collective upgradation. And people say all these things because they don't read Purana. Go and read Purana. You will see the Purana itself is telling this. And go and read Mahabharata. As I said, like the Adi Parva, the first 53 chapter is the conversation between Suta and Shainaka. So you will see in that Mahabharata narration always these layers. If you don't know these 3 layers, you will get confused.
So who's Shaitaka?
Shaunaka. Shaunaka is the sage.
Yeah, Shaunaka.
That
This
sage
is
was the one who
Itihasa.
was doing the Dandakaranya.
Correct.
This is Itihasa, right?
Yeah, Itihasa, but the Itihasa was retold.
But, yeah.
So,
And we have access to the first one, the Jayam.
No, what we have is only what Suta said.
so did this happen to Ramayana too?
No, Ramayana is fairly straightforward. Those 24,000 verses were composed by Valmiki.
Valmiki.
And you could see that flow and you could see that same style in Ramayana.
But Rajesh, the question still remains though, right? The question is that how can somebody compile this 100,000? So in this case, the Sutta retold the story, which
Yeah.
is still the 100,000.
No, Vyasa composed only 8,000.
Okay.
So 8,000, Vaishampayana retold that in 24,000. And then Suta retold, it became 100,000. So Suta expanded that a little bit more. So Vyasa's original composition is only 8,000.
So there's no demarcation of when where the 8,000 stops or the one starts off or something like that, right?
No.
So how do we even know this history that there was this
This took place. Mahabharata itself tells that. The history is the Mahabharata, the starting words of the Mahabharata, verse 52, chapter 52, Adi Parva. I'll even bring that verse.
Right, but then now
Rajaji, does Vyasa's Jayam contain all the 18 parvas?
Yes.
It's just an elaboration.
Yeah, it's an elaboration. That's it.
There's nothing wrong, but I don't think you should do a long one though.
For the first time I understood, Devta,
tell me how many minutes.
He has written his own version of Mahabharata and he calls that book Jaya. So now I understood why he calls it Jaya.
Yeah. So from Mahabharata it became Bharata, and from Bharata it became Jaya. Mahabharata.
Jaya to Bharat, Bharat to Mahabharata.
So be realistic.
It answers that it's not one person who wrote 100,000. Correct.
Absolutely.
Period.
And period. And also this, see, up to this Suta, right? He was Ugrashravas. He was a very well qualified rishi, and he was a direct disciple of Vaishampayana. Vaishampayana is a direct disciple of Vyasa. So that, and the retelling of Vaishampayana was in front of Vyasa. So in this yajna, Janameja asked Vyasa to tell the story, but Vyasa tells he is better narrator. So just be realistic, and also means don't think that means people don't read Mahabharata and they say that these 100,000 verses were composed by Vyasa. Mahabharata itself is telling that the source is Mahabharata. Okay.
So the extra verses, were they like made, like since it is supposed to be an itihas?
Yep.
Did they use their imagination in?
Of course. Vyasa himself tells that. See, it has history, and then he tells it has my Vak Vibhuti.
Commentary.
Yeah, additions. See, he said I repurposed some of the history for what? For conveying the message, Dharmam Chara. I called out last week itself. There is additions, there is exaggerations, and there is all these things are there. Ramayana, classic example. How can one person have 10 heads, 20 hands? Swami Chinmayananda used to say, if he gets cold, what a terrible state.
Hope nothing was omitted from the initial story and nothing was...
No, because these are
because
under the guidance, right?
Because in the Bible, things were omitted also, right? I mean, they
took out a lot of stuff. Penetration happened, right?
Yeah, they took out a lot of
Ignatius
stuff.
D. Loyola, he wrote a beautiful book, Infiltration and Penetrations of these Testaments. That type of things didn't happen.
Right.
And Bible, the biggest problem was what? The original teaching was in what? Which language? Aramis.
Right.
And that got translated into Greek.
Right.
And from Greek only, it translated to English. So when you know 2 levels of translation happens, a lot of things you lose.
True.
So the 2,000 different versions of Bible, if you take two to three different versions, you will see extremely contradictory stuff.
True.
Suppose, means when I study something, if I have doubt, I go to the Greek word and try to get the synonyms. That much spoiled it is.
But so Ravana's 10 heads is not to be taken literally, isn't it, Rajesh? He is so knowledgeable. He is so knowledgeable that the artist picturized like that.
Correct. That's what the additions are there. Like it is. That is why Vak Vibhuti is there.
Doesn't somebody say that those are the traits of the person? Those 10 things that he
Correct.
had?
No, I think it is the 10 different personalities was there in Ravana. Ravana was a Shiva Bhakta.
Yeah, that's what I have heard.
Ravana was a Shiva Bhakta. Ravana was a good person in so many things. And Ravana also a beautiful musician. He was a learned person in Samaveda. Veena player. And do you know, like, one of the compositions of Ravana is very popular.
Shivatandava
Stotra, composed by Ravana.
Yeah.
See, that is the beauty of our culture. Even if it is composed by Ravana, it doesn't matter who did that. If that work is good, it will be taken by the tradition. That's very important.
Excuse me. Are Ramayana and Mahabharata, are these written text, and is this history or mythology?
It is history because it is known as itihasa. Itihasa means thus it happened. So what they used to, because that is the difference between Purana and Itihasa. Itihasa means something happened in the history. So something happened in ancient India. That history was taken and that history was enhanced with some additions to make sure that it conveys the message Dharmam Chara. So that's it. So definitely, if somebody tells that these are all myths, that is not correct. It happened.
Yeah, how it started was that on FB there was a reference to the Mahabharata, and someone, the administrator of that page, he clarified that Mahabharata is mythology.
No,
how do we define what's the difference between a piece of history and a mythology?
Mythology means it is everything is myth, right? That is the very, very simple definition. So meaning Mahabharata means there are so many things you can see in the history, right? For example, the Kurukshetra is there. It means the Dwaraka. Actually, if you go and look at the things you found from Dwaraka, actually, I had a person known to me, Sushma Londe, like she was in Pennsylvania. She did a phenomenal compilation on the historical archaeology findings of all these historic facts. So there were a lot of evidence which connects us to these points. That is one thing. But is everything is history? Definitely not. But there is historical component, 100%. Ramayana and Mahabharata, there is 100% historical components. And imagine, right? Ramayana itself is imagine the journey of Rama from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka. See, imagine you're talking in an age which is digital communication is plenty. In an age, maximum speed of a person is 30 kilometers per hour. That is the speed of a horse. So a person sitting in northern India, Valmiki was in Haryana somewhere, he is writing a story which refers things in Indonesia, which is Mount Meru, and it talks about Afghanistan, it talks about Assam, and it talks about a person's journey from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka. You can trace every place mentioned in Ramayana, it still stands. And you can tell this as a coincidence, but you have this Adam Bridge, so-called Adam Bridge, called Ramasetu. And it's a miracle, right? So how can exactly a bridge is there even now? They can say that it is nature-made. People say that it is not man-made, but that doesn't negate the fact that there was a bridge between that country and in a place exactly mentioned in Ramayana. So even if you go to Rameshwaram, like you could see the stones that is floating in the water. You can go and see. People can see these as 100% myth, but I think the right approach is take the middle ground. It is nothing is 100% black and white. I'm being honest. I'm not using any of my bias. I'm just feeling what I feel true, right? So history is definitely there. For example, if you take the story of Christ, definitely there is history. 100% sure that there was a Christ, but did he walk over the water? It could be an addition, right? That is the difference between history versus these itihasa. So the story of Christ, you can say that it is an itihasa. And Muhammad, 100% like he was there. But is everything floating around in his name is correct? Absolutely not. So is the case with Buddha.
Thank
The,
you.
the one amazing thing that I feel is all these stories. I mean, whether it's Christianity or any other story from Hinduism, they all have that one part where the water separates and the person walks through it. How, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, this was written somewhere else, and our story part was written somewhere
The
else, and
human
there's so much
mind thinks,
similarity between all these stories.
first of all, the purpose is the same, right? Everybody means, remember the other day I said, Shastram, the definition is what? Initially, you wanted to guide you through a commandment. And that is the purpose of this Purana and Idihasa, right? The story, through story, you tell some truth. And once you get informed, it will lead you to the knowledge. So that's the time you have to go and take the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads and study.
These books are written for all spectrum of people, right? This is so whoever has the need, where you just get that message and keep going, right?
And this Puranas and Idihasas played a big role. Like if you take every art form of our country, it is influenced by Vyasa. So that's why they say Vyaso Chishtam Jagat Sarvam. Any story, hundreds of different types of people, their thinking, everything is included in Mahabharata. So, as I said earlier in the Bhagavad Gita class, right? If somebody say that the God needs to have a history, you're shooting on your own foot.
I think Vishalji has a question.
Okay, I'm not seeing it. Yeah, please, can you read that, Rajesh?
No,
It's
just
who has this question.
Yeah.
I was listening early on when you said that.
We can't hear you properly. Can you speak up a little bit?
What's your name?
Arnav.
Wow.
No, go ahead.
I was
Great.
When you said that everything was history, or most things were history in the Mahabharata, but after Yudhishthira died, he went to Swarg and Nurg. But aren't we supposed to try and find our way to merging with the Paramatma?
Good question. I didn't say that everything is history, right? I said that it has history. So along with history, what you said is beyond the human perception, right? After the death, like you're absolutely right. In the final chapter of Mahabharata, you see after the death of Yudhishthira, you see all of them going to heaven and all these questions, which is definitely not history. We know that. So what I said is very clear. I said it has history. So there could have been a Mahabharata, that is the history. There could have been a civil war at that point of time. And Vyasa took that and he wrote a bigger epic out of it. But good intelligent thinking. Good job, Arnab. You have to question like that. And without questioning, you won't understand.
I think Pradeep's daughter has a question.
Oh, please.
Pradeep.
No, Rajesh.
Yeah, go ahead and ask the question.
No. She. I was asking whether did you hear her, because she came into the room.
Oh, okay. I thought she had a question. Okay.
No worries.
Sorry.
No. That's okay. Like this is not a guru's lecture hall. You can all feel free. If a dog barks, that's it.
Good, Arnabji. Yeah, you had a question.
Sure. So Rajesh, like for any of these scriptures, if it's a pure mythology, does it have any instructive value? Or isn't there value only if it has some aspect of itihasa or history in it? Otherwise, people won't believe it.
No, I think, see, the reason is Puranas. If you really look at Puranas, the main characters of these Puranas are celestial beings, right? So a Vishnu or a Shiva or Indra or Varuna, all those people. So typically what happens? They practice certain things which is written in Veda. So, but the problem is, people will say that a Vishnu can practice, a Shiva can practice. But what about, can that happen here, near to me? So that's why the Itihasas were presented. So he said, yeah, a Rama who lived in Ayodhya, who had to go through a lot of struggles in his life, but he practiced Dharmam Chara. So that is the message of Ramayana, Dharmam Chara. So I will explain that in another sessions. I'll do a few more sessions on these Itihasas and Puranas. Seems a lot of questions are from that domain. So I got another question saying about when you say Rama practiced Dharma, how can you justify everything in Rama? Definitely. I'm going to explain that one by one. Means I already explained what is Mukhya Dharma and Gauna Dharma, and when they conflict, what you have to do. So we will explain each one of that one by one. But today's purpose was totally different, just to answer the question, how one person can write 400,000 verses. Second answer is, I only said the first one. The second one is a person like Vyasa, he can do it if he wants. Even in the translation, like one of the popular translation of Mahabharata, which is verse by verse translation, one person has done. His name, he's in Kerala. His name is Kodungallur Kunyikuttan Tampuran. He's known as Bhasha Vyasa or Kerala Vyasa. He composed the entire Mahabharata verse by verse. You know how many days he took? 874 days.
That's it.
It's a history. It's a history. 100,000 verses he translated into Malayalam, and brilliantly, I mean, every Bhagavad Gita verse I refer, I refer his translation also. Brilliantly translated. And his skill was known as Druta Kavana Padava, ability to compose. And even when he write letters to other people, he used to write it in poetry. So poetry used to come from him. And he lived only up to 49 years.
It's almost 120 verses a day.
120 verses a day he composed. Can you imagine?
Amazing. That's amazing.
874 verses, 874. And after that he said, now my next goal is translate all the 18 Puranas. So by that time he passed away at the age of 49. Otherwise he would have done that.
Similarly, Annamacharya is supposed to have composed like a 14 lakhs, right? So anyway, but one important question, Rajesh.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the questions are coming like, if it is a mythology, is there any message that we should really take it seriously? Or, every story has this, one river, splitting the people going. Or Parikshit, King Parikshit, puts this snake around a rishi, and then he gets, Shapam by everything, and then the Shauna or Vaishampayana recites his story
Shuka, right?
Shuka tells the story for his moksha. So these are the very distracting points for whatever you're going to teach in the next many weeks and years to come, right? This is how these people should take this, right? Here are the things they're going to inhibit or prevent them the teachings that you're going to convey that. So how they should approach to your listening and your teachings. Can you?
Yeah, actually see what we are teaching, our subject matter don't have that ambiguity. We are not teaching the Purana. So I was just answering a question. So what Shankaracharya teaches, what's in Upanishad, you don't have to, means you can put all your logical weight, it won't fall. It is completely logical. But the question is, you have to learn how to read Puranas, because you read Purana and you can get the wrong message completely. So you need to understand what is the purpose of Purana, why the Purana is composed. So I tried to explain that last week. The main theme of Puranas and Idihasas, remember I gave the verse in Mahabharata in one of the Gita classes, one of the Vedanta classes, right? One verse from Mahabharata I quoted exactly line by line, and it tells why you have to have these Puranas and Idihasas on top of Veda. Because Veda, which is meant to remove the fear of all the people, is afraid of one category.
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation. Yes, that exactly was the verse. So Puranas, the purpose of the Purana is just give some hands and legs and introduce these concepts. But the problem is, any story you tell to people, people can take it exactly in the negative way, right? Do you know the famous story? One priest of a church was conducting a class. He was doing an awareness program against alcoholism. So he thought, I will do a wonderful idea. So he had one glass of water and put a worm in that. And then he had another glass of water, put a worm in that. Another glass of alcohol. What happened? This worm in the alcohol didn't survive, whereas the worm in the water survived. So he asked the audience, what exactly is the message you took? There was a full drunkard in that group. What did he say? If you drink water, all the worms in your stomach is completely safe. And if you drink alcohol regularly, your stomach will be clean. So this is exactly what some people, when they read Purana, they find an excuse to marry more or kill people, all that. The purpose is forgotten. So it's need to be taught, because ideally these Puranas were meant to be told by these Sutas, who are a professional narrators. And they will tell you the story and they'll tell you the meaning. So now what happens? We just take the book, read it, or watch a serial and get exactly the opposite message.
One thing that bothers me all the time is all these books. I mean, no matter whether it's Atma Bodha or any book for that matter, after reading all this or after knowing all the the contents of it, understanding it, shouldn't a person be really what do you call angry free and desire free and all that kind of stuff? But if you see
the itself answered right?
No, but if you see all the exactly, but if you see all these sages, all the time when you look at watch the movies, they all get angry so fast, and especially forget exactly, they're all giving you shapas and stuff like that. They get angry in a second if they don't get food in 2 seconds. Like I forget, I think which story it was, but he the sage comes to the home and he asks for food.
They are not Vedaragins. That is why all these problems happens. See,
yeah, but Rajesh, I'm like wondering, like we have come to a stage. I mean, we have not come to a stage. At least we are in the learning process. We have come to reading Gita chapter 7, knowing about the existence of all that. And here I know that there is a Parabrahman. I'm like, to me, this itihasas and all don't, like, they're all like stories, like I'm not able to give significance to those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's a common problem. I had the same thing, but it's for a different purpose, because I'm studying myself. I'm studying Ramayana and Mahabharata, and I'm also reading Brahma Purana. So in between, I can do 1 or 2 sessions, which shows really the relevance, because Ramayana just makes me really surprised to see the depth of knowledge, the Vedantic knowledge embedded in that. Even if you take these first 4 or 5 verses, it conveys a message. Ramayana, as I said, right? What is the theme of Ramayana? Ramo Vigrahavan Dharma. And who says that first time? I told you this. Maricha. So a person who is supposed to be your enemy praises you without your presence.
That shows the greatness of you.
Great. It tells, and also it demonstrates different scenarios and how much personal pain Rama had when he was making certain decision, and how much commitment he had towards the dharma. And dharma, what exactly is the dharma, was very defined, right? Like there were so many situations in Ramayana where the Mukhya Dharma and Gauna Dharma conflicts, and clearly what Miki showed, Rama was preferring what he believed to be the Mukhya Dharma. So that is what we need to do. If so, it's a model. But if you practiced yourself, if you practiced enough with Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga, then you don't need these Puranas and Idihasas. It is for the people, like kids, when they go to the kindergarten. Do you teach them the artificial intelligence or advanced physics?
But Rajesh, actually, I was started reading these Puranas. If you read Gajendra Moksha, for example, they can be told as just like a stories. But the hidden meaning in the real Purana, if you read those things, there is clearly interpreted actually what is the meaning of that.
Right.
For example,
Garuda Puranam
that
is
is
the
the
same. Garuda Puranam is the same.
same thing, right? So Bhuvanesh, so whatever you said, that's not correct. That is not told as a story. That's what people remember that as a story, because in the movies, that's all they tell, right? They don't have time to tell the hidden, all this knowledge on that, right? Convey that. But
They
if you
don't
read the
touch
book,
it. They don't touch it. But only when you start exploring, you come to know about all these things.
But my point is,
the book actually it is interpreted very well there.
Yeah, but the point is, Vijay, right? If you have that much skill, you have easy books like Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads to go and directly understand that teaching. But the purpose of the Purana is to bring, actually I'm doing some research on Purana. It's very interesting. The historical context is also very important. Like there was a time people were moving away from all the righteousness and values. That time, how to instill this. These sutras did a wonderful job. They went to villages, went to all these places, brought people into devotion, brought people into the path of dharma. How? Through the Purana. Upanishads would not have done that. Bhagavad Gita would not have done that.
Correct.
Brahma Sutra definitely would not have done that. It is only appealing to a small subset.
Yeah.
On another note, Rajeshji, this when we talked about kids and Ramayanam, one of my students, because I had always told them that, wish for something and write Sri Rama Jayam, and
that's good,
right? Okay, so this recently his grandmother died. So before that, when she was very serious, like she was taken to the hospital, he started writing and everything. And they prayed all the Sai Charit, everything they read. So now finally the result is death. That lady is gone because of negligence in the hospital, because they were all attending to Corona. They never bothered about this serious woman. So she passed away just 2 weeks back. So this boy, how will he get convinced that in his mind, oh, I'm doing this, I'm writing this, so my grandma will be safe, right? Now she's gone. So it's very difficult for me to convince this boy that, what do I tell?
Right. First of all, means we need to be very clear when we tell them, when you write, right? See, I always give this example. One person, two people are praying to God. One person has a wedding in his family. And another person is waiting for a rain for his agriculture. Both of them going to the temple. And actually, one person is praying, oh Lord, crying, right? Please don't rain to next 1 week. After 5 minutes, the other person is coming.
Please rain.
Please rain. One film producer was telling me a story. Every day, like when he starts a movie, he goes to the Ganesha temple in Trivandrum and he used to pray that, oh Lord, the film was scheduled for 60 days. Let that be completed in 50 days. Immediately the light boy will go there. What would be his prayer? Oh Ganesha, let it be 90 days so that I will get that much back. So who the Lord is going to decide? See, God, the prayer is not a guarantee for whatever I wish to happen. The prayer is something that is the right thing will happen. And whether you pray or not, it doesn't matter. The right thing will happen. So what is the benefit of prayer? Two things. There is a drishta phala and there is an adrishta phala. We discussed that in our discussion on karma, right? Remember, what is the benefit of prayer in that drishta phala and prayer in the adrishta phala? Prayer is going to give me the ability to withstand any situation. That is a drishta phala. Adrishta phala is what? The adrishta phala, it is going to give him as a good input, good luck, good favorable conditions in the future. So we need to be very clear. Initially, it's okay to tell them that this is an incentive. Then God is whom, if that is the case. Suppose somebody comes and prays, and now Corona, there is no temple. Do you think that the God will feel sad? Nobody is visiting me? Absolutely not. We need to explain this gradually, unfold the meaning of the real God, because If the God is based on this faith, Vijay Swami Tadatmananda every day used to tell, like, this faith-based belief can be shaken easily. One bad incident is good enough.
Yep.
Lose that faith. And 100%, how can we sustain somebody's life? It means even the best person who is supposed to have these miracles, how many miracles they are seeing, how much they can stretch? Up to 120 years. After that, it's gone. So it's very important that we need to tell them that that was the right thing to happen. And your prayer would definitely help to give a better gati to, even that is not technically correct, but at least we can make the kid.
Yeah, that's what I did. But I'm just thinking, like, in my mind, I mean, like.
Yeah, gradually we need to bring, and you see, that's why I think Swami Dayananda used to tell multiple times, the God needs to be understood more than blindly believing.
But a small boy, I cannot make.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand.
I can only instill faith in him, right? I can say, oh, there is God, he'll take care of everything, you know. I can't do that.
The God will do, the answer is the God will, if you pray, the God will do the best for you, the best case scenario for you.
Probably this lady would have been suffering if she was
suffering, and because we don't know all the possibilities what would have been happened to anybody. So
Rajesh, this is sorry.
I think Vishal is trying to ask a question, Rajesh.
Yeah. Actually, my son again, and he pretty much brought up the same point. He's listening to this conversation that maybe the kid would have been told that grandmom was in huge pain, and what God did was to whatever
ease the pain. Yeah, ease the pain.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Exactly, that's what Poonaji was telling. Like, under the circumstances, this is the best
it could happen.
Yeah. And that is how we can answer. And these are hard truths of life. We cannot do that. So we exceeded 35 minutes, but good discussions. So we will stop here. And, please post your questions in the WhatsApp group. And rather than individually mailing, I may lose it because I got a few individual questions. So post, if it is not personal, please post it in WhatsApp. That would be beneficial for all. And it is easy for me to track.
I'm still waiting for your answers.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. But I started with the last week's question.
No problem.
Yeah, I thought like we are giving, it's taking a lot of time for question answers, but which is good. Really good.
Maybe we can have a session for just question and answers.
Yeah, we can do that.
Then nobody will have questions, you know. When we are talking, we get all this.
Yeah. But thank you very much for staying extra time. We will
thank you.
Talk Sunday. We will continue with the Bhagavad Gita.
Thank you, Rajan.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.